Hi guys, welcome to I Want to Eat. Today we're going to be making the seafood bisque. And to do that we have some Dungeness crab, some shrimp with the heads, a couple of lobster tails, an onion, lemon, garlic, some tomatoes, bell pepper, celery, carrot, and some heavy cream. So the very first thing we're going to want to do is start prepping our vegetables, beginning with the onion, which we're just going to peel and then roughly chop. Eventually all of the vegetables will be going in the blender, so there's no need to worry too much about knife work here. Next we'll cut our lemon into some wedges. Along with our seafood, the lemon is about the only thing that won't go in the blender. We're just going to be using it while we're steaming the seafood to add some taste. We want to keep the peels on because we don't just want the juice, we also want the essential oils that you find in the peel. Next we'll take our garlic cloves and just crush them lightly. Next we'll get a pot, add some water, and then a splash of white wine. The wine here doesn't only add a good flavor to the broth, but it also gets rid of any fishiness and bad smell that we might not want. To this we'll add a pinch of salt, a few cracks of black pepper, and then we'll add our aromatics, the lemon, the onion, and the garlic. Add enough water to cover and then give it a little shake to distribute evenly. Optionally, you can also add a steaming basket, but the onions and lemon will create kind of a bed that the seafood can rest on, so it's not directly touching the heat. We do want the seafood to steam, not to boil, so while it can be in the water a little bit, it shouldn't be completely under the water or touching the bottom of the pot. While we're waiting for our water to come to a boil, let's cut some of the other vegetables that we'll be using later. Again, because these are eventually going to go in the blender, we just have to chop everything roughly. So we'll just chop our carrot. And let's also chop our celery. If you can find celery with leaves, that actually works better. Now we'll also cut our tomato. Optionally, feel free to add tomato paste as well if you want a stronger flavor. I'm using orange bell pepper here, but you could also use red. Be sure to trim the stem and take off any white parts from the inside. These are very tough and bitter and won't be very nice in soup. The bell pepper is of course optional, but I think it adds a nice sweetness and color to the final product. Now that our water is boiling, let's add our seafood to it. We're going to start with the crab and then the lobster. We'll be putting the shrimp on top because it needs less time to cook, and this way it's further away from the heat so we don't end up with overdone shrimp. We are steaming our seafood, so make sure to put the lid on, that way steam has a chance to build up in the pot. One of the most common mistakes people make when cooking lobster, crab, shrimp, and those kind of things is that they overcook it. An easy way to tell when it's ready is when the color changes. You'll notice here that the half of the lobster tail that was in the hot water is much redder, much brighter than the other half. So when both halves are bright red like that, that is a good indication that the lobster is done. I also split the lobster tails. This will allow the heat to penetrate a little more easily and will also make it much easier to take the meat out later. Do keep an eye on the seafood because we really don't want to overcook it. When shrimp, lobster, or crab is overcooked, it loses its taste and it becomes very mushy. It turns from something very pleasant into something you really don't want to eat. We can see that the shrimp and the lobster are both bright red and curled up. This means that they are done. So let's take all of our seafood out of the pot and put it aside for now. Once the seafood is out of the pot, make sure to also take out the lemon peel. Its job is done. It's added flavor to the broth, and we don't want to be eating whole lemon slices. So now we have a beautiful, rich seafood stock that we'll be using as a base for our bisque. So to our stock, let's add our chopped veggies. Give it a quick stir and then let it boil for a while. While our bisque is cooking down, let's get the meat out of our shellfish. This will be the most time-consuming process. The most time-consuming of the shellfish is, of course, the crab, but we'll take our time. We have plenty of it. We'll go segment by segment and get as much meat as we can. Make sure not to ignore the body sections of the crab. That's where you can usually get the largest pieces, and it's definitely not something to waste. A good reason to use Dungeness crab is because the shell is quite soft. You're able to break it with just your fingers. You can of course use other crab, but do be careful. If the shell is harder, it can also be quite sharp and cut your hands. Keep breaking the crab along the joints, and then just break it open. Try to take the meat out in as whole pieces as possible, but if you break it, no big deal. If you find yourself struggling with getting the meat out of the shell, or if you find yourself breaking too much of it, feel free to use some kitchen scissors to cut the shell in half and then just scoop it out from there. Here is all the meat we got from 3 clusters of Dungeness crab. It is more than I was expecting, and definitely worth the effort. With the crab done, we'll move on to the lobster. I'm going to finish the split and completely cut them in half. This will make it much easier to get the meat out. Many people who try to shell lobster immediately go for breaking the shell open, trying to rip it out. But all you want to do is be gentle, get your fingers between the shell and the meat, and lightly push and lift. It'll come out on its own if it's cooked right. Here you can see I just gently put my thumb between the shell and the meat. Keep pushing segment by segment and it lifts out by itself. If the lobster sticks to the shell, that usually means it's overcooked. Yet another reason to be very careful when steaming. Lastly, let's peel the shrimp, not too hard, just take the head. Try to keep as much of that brain as you can because there's a lot of umami in there. And peel the legs first, then take the shell from that opening. Here you can see the finished yield we got from all of our shellfish. It's a decent amount, definitely good enough for bisque, and you'll probably end up with a little extra. In the time it took to shell our crab, lobster, and shrimp, the soup has cooked down enough, the vegetables have cooked through. So now we're going to go on to the next step, which is to add it all into a blender and puree until it's smooth. So we're almost done with our bisque, only a few things left to do now. First, set aside the best pieces of seafood, the ones that came out the cleanest from the shell, because we're going to be putting those on top. If you have any that didn't come out clean, we're just going to cut it into chunks, and then we're going to mix it into the soup. Make sure to taste the soup and adjust the seasoning to your preference. So we're going to bring our now pureed soup to a light simmer, and then we're going to add about a half cup of heavy cream. How much cream you want to add really depends on your taste and preference. If you want a thinner, chunkier soup, add less cream. If you want it creamier, add more. Once the cream is mixed in and incorporated, all that's left to do is add the seafood and shut off the heat because we don't want to cook the seafood any further. Once you've added your seafood, give it a quick mix. Be very gentle because we don't want to break up the crab we spent so much time on earlier. And there you have it, seafood bisque. So, considering all the effort that we've gone to so far, let's not skimp on the toppings. Add the best looking pieces of lobster, shrimp, and crab to the top of your bisque. Put a few leaves of parsley on there, and then a drizzle of olive oil around the side. And now you have a finished bowl of bisque ready to serve, and I guarantee you can compete with any restaurant. But thank you everyone so much for watching this episode of I Want to Eat. If you found yourself enjoying this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting what you want to see next. And stay tuned for more. We upload weekly. Thank you.